To some, failure is proof they can't do something. To me, failure is proof that I deserve to follow my passions. I was born in Montreal, Canada, in November of 1988, and I was born into a strong and tight-knit Italian family, in a family that loved each other, that always believed in following each other's dreams, and to eat pasta every single Sunday. My dad was a civil engineer who had his own business as a construction manager, building houses and commercial buildings for all of Montreal. And my mom was a mathematician who gave up her career to stay home and raise my brother and I. Both my parents were symbols of strength, and they were symbols of strength to me in both family bond and connection, and also in running a business. My dad, like I mentioned before, had his own company as a construction manager. And it was from my dad that I learned about what being an entrepreneur really meant. When you're becoming an entrepreneur, you need to accept two things. One, the things that are good that coming in your life, you'll ride that high as you can go. But two, there's also a lot of downs that go into a business, and those downs are called failures. And when it comes to failures, it's not exactly a telling sign that the company is not worth standing up on its own 2 feet, but rather it's a sign that you're going in the right direction. So in the economy of Montreal in 1996, around that time frame, business started to get really slow. And if you're familiar with what was going on in Montreal, Canada, around the mid-90s, there was a separatist movement happening, and there was this huge movement to start bringing Montreal back to its French roots, bringing the language back to French, and penalizing businesses and school systems that were taught in English or use the English language. So as you can imagine, my dad's company was taking a hit because we were in fact an English company. And my family started to feel the financial struggle. And after pushing and trying to make the business go for as much as we could, in 1997, my family and we all packed up our bags, moved everything that we had in our possession to the USA, and we arrived in Massachusetts, particularly in Canton, for those of you that know Massachusetts. And it was there that my dad decided and proceeded to start his business again from the ground up. And as I know, this is like a big deal when it comes to a company. You have to start all over again, and if you're in your mid-30s and having to start all over again with a family, that's a lot of pressure. And my mom continued to take care of us and to watch us as we decided to get acclimated into the USA and into the schools. So my brother and I went to our first public school in the USA, and that's where I started experiencing my first feelings of failure. When I went to this school, I was teased a great deal. My accent was very strange. I had a French Canadian accent. I also didn't know all the kids from kindergarten because all these kids knew each other from kindergarten to the 3rd grade or the 2nd grade, which is when I came in. They didn't like me. They didn't like how I was different. Then there was the school bully who picked on me constantly. And it was always during gym class that this girl, will call her Beatrice. It was this girl that decided to always make fun of the fact of how slow I would run when we would do laps around the gym. And she would have the entire class laugh at me while I was finishing up my sprints because I was the slowest one in the entire pack. And I just couldn't keep up. And the teasing happened for a very long time, and I did tell my mom about it, and she was very concerned. But for some reason, that feeling of failure, of being made fun of by a bunch of kids who already hated me, being in a place that I was alone, not surrounded by my friends or my cousins or my grandparents, that was very hard. And in those moments, all I felt like doing was packing up my bags, getting a bus, and chartering all the way back to Montreal. I did not want to be in the US. I hated everything about it. And it was so unfamiliar to me because I felt unworthy, I felt stupid, and I just felt like I couldn't keep up. And over time, there's some weird thing that happens to me when I encounter failure. Failure for me, I don't know if it was because of all the Disney movies I used to watch as a kid, or if it was because I just had this gut reaction when it came to failure, but I saw it as motivation. I saw it as my way to prove something to myself. So there came field day at school, and one of the activities that we had to do in field day was to run a race around a track. And lo and behold, me and Beatrice and I were one of the top contenders for running this race. And as you can imagine, Beatrice was very certain that she would win the race. And I know this maybe sounds like a movie, but this is actually very true. When the start time went off, we both took off, and she ran straight ahead, was just yards in front of me, and I was struggling. I was struggling to run those laps, and I could see she was very far ahead of me. It was when we started rounding the second lap, was when something inside of me started to kick in, and that was, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And the saying, I think I can, I think I can, I know I can, I know I can, in my mind, I just kept saying it so loud that I actually started saying it in between gasps of breath as I was running. I think I can, I think I can. And as I kept running and running, I started gaining speed. And before I knew it, by the time we were reaching the middle of the fourth lap, I was neck and neck with Beatrice. And then when I rounded the last corner, I beat her by 3 yards. I remember following that time, falling to the ground, gasping for air, sweating, and I hear an entire crowd just screaming and clapping and being extremely just overwhelmed and not really seeing this coming. And that was when I realized that what I had in failure from my previous months of humiliation, of being teased, of being made fun of being told that I was worth nothing, that was, and then to the field day where I won that race, that was my first real example of overcoming failure, looking at it and saying, not today. This is not going to happen to me, and I will prove it to you. And that kind of just set me into this journey of constantly failing, but always trying to find a way to get back into the groove and to prove to myself that this is something that I am worthy of. And I saw failure not as a sign of stopping what I am doing, but as an incentive to try harder, to see where I can go. And to me, failing was my motivation, and in some ways it kicked in like a drug to me. So many years later, I decided to get a degree in mechanical engineering. I love to tinker, I love to invent things, and I thought it was so incredibly cool to make machines and to make devices that could help people save their lives or even serve them better and make their lives easier to live every single day. That to me was such a special vocation. So I decided to go to school in Massachusetts at Worcester Polytechnic Institute, where I specialized in mechanical engineering. And it was there that I got my second biggest dose of failure. I knew engineering would be very, very hard. And for those of you that are in engineering right now, that are currently pursuing it or have pursued it, my kudos and my absolute, let's see, pity and my feelings of just what you do every day. And my heart goes out to you. It is a very, very hard degree to get. And for me, on top of it being very tough, was that math didn't always come naturally to me. Now, this is a very weird thing to say because I always struggled with math. That was something that I always had a problem with. And I realized over time that the more I studied, the more I practiced, the better I got. So for me, math was not something that I couldn't have. It was just something that didn't come naturally to me. So when I would go to classes and do my mechanical engineering classes and sit down and take notes, the norm for me was I would have absolutely zero to no clue what would be happening in this class. I'd just take notes vigorously, and I would see people next to me who wouldn't even take notes, or they would just not go to class. And, when we had a test, they'd walk in, do the test, pass with flying colors, and here I am. I'm still waiting until the end, requesting 5 more minutes to go and finish my exam. And if that is not if you don't get that natural pang of like, holy crap, is this for me? Is this something that, I'm good at, that I deserve to be in? I don't know what else. I mean, I felt like an imposter. I felt like, how can I possibly be running here with the big dogs, with these people that know engineering like the back of their hand, and here I am, I'm just struggling to even grasp a concept. I had such a hard time. Studying took me days to do, which took other people hours, and in my head I thought to myself, how do I deserve to be here? I can't even take notes and understand anything. What makes me think that I can get a degree in this? And so it was this again, this feeling of failure, this feeling that, I pitted my entire passion on engineering. I took out so much money in student loans to just get to this point, and here I am, I'm choking at the finish line because I just don't understand stuff. So it was here that, if I had listened to the voices, I would have quit school. I would have decided to do something else that probably would have felt comfortable to me. But this was my opportunity once again to really prove to myself I can do this. This is something that I set out to do, and I will do it because I need to honor myself and to say, yes, I can do this. So after a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, I managed to pass with a summa cum laude, with a master's degree in mechanical engineering, with a minor in digital art, and I placed in the top 6 in my entire engineering department for developing a mechanical arm prototype that could help the elderly with arthritis. So I mean, it is really crazy now that I'm saying this out loud, but if I had listened to those voices at the very beginning that told me, you can't do this, you're stupid, you don't understand these things, I would not have come out as strong as I did on the other side. I mean, I have a patent pending, for Pete's sake, for this device, and here I was at the very beginning thinking I didn't know what I was doing, and I had no idea and had no business being there, and here I am. I failed, and I failed magnificently, and here I am. So after college, I got a job with a federal contractor in Connecticut, and I worked there as a structural engineer for 5 years. And this again was a huge test for me because I struggled. So as I mentioned before, I graduated with a degree, but going into the work field, a lot of things that you do learn when you're in school, you do get some things that you apply to your job, but there's so many other things that you just don't think to that you don't really understand or use at your new job. So I was doing that, and I figured I saw people all around me quickly grasping things. Like they would be doing studies, research, and they would be like, oh yeah, it's this, and oh yeah, remember this concept, you do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm like sitting there and thinking to myself, holy shit, if they only knew how like everything was just flying over my head. I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. And also, to make things worse, I was a female in engineering. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with females in engineering, but that's a huge deal. And there's always this kind of stigma that I'm trying to fight in the back of my mind of females are bad at math and they're bad at science. And I just did not want to be that demographic. I did not want that to be me. So I, even though I failed at understanding, I did my best. I did research. I did homework for myself, because I knew that if I understood and gave myself time to understand something, I'd be able to excel. And while all this was happening, I started to really let go of my weight. I was not doing well physically. I was eating terribly, making terrible choices for myself. My waistline was expanding from the terrible foods I was eating. And eventually, over time, one day I remember this so clearly. I went to the mirror, looked at myself, and I saw a bald spot like right over here. You probably can't really see it as much anymore because I've taken way better care of myself now, but I noticed in the mirror I was looking and I had falling hair. I had alopecia, very early onset alopecia, and this is a disease. And if anything was rock bottom for me, it was here. It was at this point, because here I am at a company where I felt like I wasn't good enough. Here I was at a company that I was killing my waistline. I was fat. I felt ugly. And I had hair that was falling out. And I mean, if you're a girl, hair is your identity. That's your way of feeling feminine. And, you know, I never really felt feminine in my life. And I felt my hair was that one last vestige I could take and say, yes, I'm a female. Hear me roar, I have hair. But after all this, with my hair falling out, I started realizing, like, holy shit, I don't have femininity. I felt I was losing who I was as a woman. And it felt to me that I did not deserve love. I didn't deserve who I wanted and who I was with in my life. And it never felt this hard before. I mean, there were all these other stories I just said to you earlier today that, you know, it was hard, but I felt I can get through it. This was my toughest because I felt like I couldn't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I felt trapped, and I felt like I was drowning in self-pity. Now, if you've ever felt this way before, if you ever felt that you just put yourself in a situation that you just can't get out of, understand that you're not the only one. That there's more people out there just like you, like me, that struggled so much to get to where they are. And it's all because they learned to take failure and to turn it on its ass. And it was when I hit rock bottom was when I started realizing that, you know what? Fuck this. I decided to something inside me just cracked, and I had to take care of myself. I decided, you know what? I need to do this for me, and I need to push. And if I don't push, if I don't prove to myself that I can get out of my slump of my, you know, my creeping weight, I was never going to. And the only person that could do it was me. I only was responsible for my health, and I had to do it. No one else was telling me to, and I had to do it. So I began to eat better. It was hard. You know, taking away ice cream and not having to eat pizza during the week, that was hard. And I started to exercise regularly, and I began to see that even though I was busting my ass and sweating and crying at the end of every workout because I hated myself, I started to see results. I started to see that, holy shit, I can do this. I can do this. Yeah, like my body is not where I want it to be, but god damn, I'm getting there. And by me doing that, it almost began to go into this like snowball effect, you know, when you kind of start slow and you're like, this is all right. I don't know if I'm seeing anything. And then brrr, it just started getting huge for me. And I started to see a reduced waistline. I started to really love the food that I was eating. I was starting to really understand, like, yes, I need to eat this or else I'll feel like shit if I don't. And then that's when I started to really develop this passion for wanting to help other women who were just like me, who hit rock bottom, who saw themselves as failures and defined that failure as who they are, and that if you fail, you're not worth anything. And I wanted to take those women and give them a hug and say, hey, you failed. Good. Good. It's good that you fail. Because if you fail, that means you're one step closer to where you want to be. Because, honey, if you're not failing, if you're not taking that chance on yourself right now to fail and to try and keep going, you're never going to go anywhere. You will never go anywhere unless you're willing to take that risk and fail. And my goodness, I kind of wrote this down because I thought this was very interesting. With the women that I was helping, and you know, we were seeing results together, we saw our failures not as badges of shame, but rather medals of war. They were scars of battle. And you know what? Maybe if my failure was a scar, I'd be covered in scars. I'd be covered in wounds. And I wear those proudly. I have to. And you know what? If these are descriptions of my journey to get to where I am today, then hell yes, I wear them proudly. I wear my failure like I wear my clothes. You have to. You have to. And it wasn't failing that I realized how strong I was to keep going. That, you know, in some, you know, I had like balls. I had major balls that just keep going. And I mean, it wasn't as if it was easy for me to keep going. I had social anxiety. I had the, what will people think of me if I keep doing this? Will people think I'm crazy? Will they think I'm in a cult? Or whatever, you know, like all the things that you would probably think people would tell you. I was terrified. I mean, I didn't know what was ahead. I didn't know what I had in front of me. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew it would be better. I didn't know how, but it would be better. And for having failed as many times as I did, I realized if I didn't fail, I would never be happy with myself. And I'm happy to say that after 5 years of working my 9-to-5 corporate job, I decided to jump into the biggest fear-mongering, failure-inducing activity that I ever knew. And that was launching my own business. Actually, 2 businesses. Not 1, but 2. And having quit that job, I still had debt, school debt. I still had $55,000 in school debt. But in all of that fear, I knew things would work out. Because even when I failed to hit my goals, even, you know, I'm setting my goals high, but even though I know I will fail, I'm not saying if, I know I will fail. But even though I know I will fail, I am going to be going so much fucking farther than I ever thought I could. And you know what? I actually have a quote from this book that I've been reading, and you know, I kind of hit this moment today, and I had to read this quote because it kind of like, it really hit me. This is, "You're a badass at making money," and I wanted to share this. So, when you go big and take the scary leaps you need to take to change your financial or current situation, you're up there on stage with no idea what's on the other side of those blinding lights, free falling through space. But here's the great news: if you nail it, party time. If you bomb, you now know what didn't work. So when you go out there and give it another shot, you get to do so with more information. Taking a leap of faith is a win-win. Treading water in your comfort zone for the rest of your life is a snore yawn. That quote hit me like a ton of bricks because that was an example of my entire life. If the more I stayed in my comfort zone, the more I was never seeing the results that I really wanted to see. And the more that I decided to take that terrifying leap into failure and knowing that I would fail it and knowing that it's okay to fail, I went so much farther than I ever thought I could. So I want you to think about this for today. I want you to think about, what are your feelings about failure? How does it affect your life? And if you knew that you would never fail at something that you wanted to do right now, what would it be that you would do? And I want you to take this into careful consideration. Whatever you decide you want to do with your life, and thinking in your mind, this is going to be without failure, what would that life look like? More likely than not, that is your passion. So I hope this helped. I hope this was a good expose on what it means to fail, what it means to be a failure, and how I hope it's not a stigmatized term, but rather a term of endearment, a term of self-love. All right, everyone. I'll talk to you all later. Bye.